Hey, stop right there. Don't move.
I paid for everything. Here is my receipt.
You need to come with me. Now, a receipt doesn't clear you of anything. So steal that camera.
We are going to pay for Hunt's receipt. Check the CCTV. It will show everything.
You're wasting my time. Let's go.
I am not resisting. I am asking you to verify first.
I said we're done here. Move.
Some people put on a uniform and suddenly forget that the law applies to them too. Rookie cop Dylan Carver was one of those people. And the day he decided to profile, humiliate, and forcefully arrest a woman in a busy supermarket purely because of the color of her skin turned out to be the most career-defining mistake he would ever make. What happened inside that supermarket and what unfolded at the precinct shortly after left an entire department scrambling for answers. The woman Carver thought was an easy target had a few things he never bothered to check. And when she finally revealed who she was, the silence in that room said everything. You will not want to look away from this one. Now, we want to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It costs nothing, but it means everything to us. Now, let's get into it. Nadia Calloway had been on her feet for nearly 11 hours the day before. She was a sheriff. Had been for going on 9 years, and the kind of woman who took her job seriously enough that her days off rarely felt like real rest. But that particular Saturday was different. No calls, no briefings, no uniform. She pulled into the parking lot of Fresh Mart on Clover Ridge Boulevard a little past 2 in the afternoon. She was dressed simply, dark joggers, a plain gray hoodie, white sneakers. Her badge and her department-issued firearm were both locked in her glove compartment. She was not working. She was not on call. She was a woman who needed groceries. Nothing more. She grabbed a basket near the entrance and moved through the aisles without any particular rush. She picked up a few things. Some produce, a box of cereal, 2 cans of soup, a bottle of olive oil. She checked her phone once to look at a short list she had typed out the night before. She was calm, unhurried, and completely unbothered. There was nothing remarkable about Nadia that afternoon. That was exactly the point. She had earned this ordinary Saturday. 9 years of overnight shifts, tense situations, and thankless calls had given her the right to walk through a grocery store without a single thought beyond what she was going to cook for dinner. She deserved that. Anyone would. But ordinary days have a way of turning on a person without warning. By the time Nadia reached the toiletries aisle, she had no idea that someone in that store had already made a decision about her. A decision built on nothing but assumption. And that assumption was about to set off a chain of events that nobody in Fresh Mart that afternoon was prepared for. Nadia Calloway was reaching for a bottle of shampoo when she felt it. Not a sound. Not a word. Just that particular feeling of being watched. The kind that settles on a person slowly, like a weight being placed on their shoulders 1 ounce at a time. She glanced to her left and caught a young store employee named Petey staring at her from the far end of the aisle. He looked away the moment their eyes met, but he didn't move. He stayed right where he was, pretending to reorganize a shelf that didn't need reorganizing. Nadia noticed. She said nothing. She placed the shampoo in her basket and moved on. But Petey followed. He kept a distance, maybe 15 feet back, but he was consistent. Every aisle Nadia turned into, he turned into. Every time she paused, he paused. It was not subtle, and it was not professional. It was the kind of surveillance that said everything about what he assumed before she had done a single thing wrong. Nadia had experienced this before, not here, not in this store, but in others. In fitting rooms, in electronics sections, in bookshops, the follow, the stare, the assumption dressed up as caution. She knew what it was. She had always known. She made her way to the checkout line with every item she intended to buy sitting in that basket. Nothing hidden, nothing concealed, nothing taken. She placed everything on the conveyor belt and waited. Petey, however, had already done something he should not have done. He had gone to find his supervisor. And his supervisor, a stiff-shouldered man named Griff Lauder, had already picked up the phone. Not to review the security footage, not to verify anything. He called the non-emergency police line and reported a suspected shoplifter, and the description he gave was nothing more than a black woman in a gray hoodie. That call was all it took. Dylan Carver had been on the force for 14 months. 14 months was long enough to feel confident, but not nearly long enough to be wise. He was 26 years old, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the kind of certainty that people who haven't been truly tested often do. His training officer had flagged his impatience twice in his first 6 months. Both times Carver had brushed it off. He believed in his instincts. He trusted his read on situations. And his read, more often than not, was shaped by things he had never once examined in himself. He took the call at 2:19 p.m. Suspected shoplifter, Fresh Mart on Clover Ridge, black female, gray hoodie. Carver was 3 blocks away. He pulled into the Fresh Mart lot within 4 minutes, stepped out of his cruiser, and walked through the front entrance with his chest already forward and his jaw already set. He had already built the picture in his head before he saw a single thing. Griff Lauder met him near the customer service desk and pointed toward the checkout area where Nadia was standing, bag in hand, receipt already printed. She had paid. She was preparing to leave. There was no disturbance, no confrontation, no evidence of anything out of the ordinary. A reasonable officer would have slowed down at that point. Carver did not slow down. He scanned the checkout area, spotted Nadia, and moved toward her with a purpose that had nothing to do with gathering facts. He looked at her hoodie. He looked at her basket, now empty, items bagged. He looked at her face, and in the space of about 4 seconds, without a single conversation with the cashier, without requesting to see the receipt in her hand, and without once asking anyone to pull up the security footage, Dylan Carver had already made up his mind. What came next was going to cost him everything. Nadia saw him coming before he reached her. She recognized the walk, that particular brand of authority that announces itself before it speaks. She stood still, receipt in one hand, grocery bag in the other, and waited. She was not nervous. She had nothing to be nervous about, but she was alert, because 9 years in law enforcement had taught her exactly what this kind of approach meant. Carver stopped less than 2 feet in front of her and told her she needed to come with him. No introduction, no explanation, no question. Just a directive delivered to a woman who had done nothing wrong in a store full of people who were now turning to look. Nadia stayed calm. She told him she had paid for everything in her bag and held up the receipt. She told him she was happy to have someone check the footage if there was a concern. She was measured. She was reasonable. She gave him every off-ramp he needed to handle the situation correctly. Carver didn't take a single one. Instead, he told her the receipt didn't clear her of anything and that she needed to step outside with him immediately. His tone had an edge to it that went beyond procedure. It was the tone of someone who had already decided the outcome and was simply moving toward it. Other shoppers had stopped completely now. A woman near the bread display had her phone out. A cashier 2 lanes over had stopped scanning items entirely. Nadia asked him one more time to review the CCTV before taking any further steps. She was direct, composed, and entirely within her rights to make that request. Carver told her she was wasting his time. He reached for her arm. That moment, that single, unnecessary, unlawful reach, was the moment Dylan Carver's career began to unravel. He just didn't know it yet. The handcuffs went on in front of everyone. Nadia did not resist. She understood better than most that the parking lot of a grocery store was not the place to fight this battle. She had seen enough situations escalate from resistance, even justified resistance, to know that composure was the only tool that would serve her right now. So she kept her hands steady, her voice level and her eyes forward as Carver walked her through the front entrance and toward his cruiser. The woman with the phone near the bread display was still recording. Several other shoppers had followed to the entrance and were watching from behind the glass doors. Griff Lauder stood near the customer service desk, looking considerably less certain than he had 15 minutes ago. Even Petey had gone quiet, leaning against a shelf with an expression that sat somewhere between confusion and guilt. None of that stopped Carver. He put Nadia in the back of his cruiser, noted the time, and radioed in the arrest. Suspected shoplifting. 1 female in custody. He sounded composed on the radio. Routine, almost. Like this was a clean call with clear evidence and a straightforward outcome waiting at the other end. The drive to the precinct took 11 minutes. Nadia spent those 11 minutes thinking. Not panicking, not rehearsing arguments, not calculating damages, just thinking. She thought about the receipt still sitting in her grocery bag. She thought about the footage on Fresh Mart's system that nobody had reviewed. She thought about the 14 or 15 people who had watched a uniformed officer place her in handcuffs for purchasing shampoo and soup. And she thought about the badge and the credentials sitting in her glove compartment back in the Fresh Mart parking lot, the ones that were going to change the entire atmosphere of whatever room she walked into at that precinct. She almost felt sorry for Dylan Carver. Almost. The processing room at the precinct was routinely busy on Saturday afternoons. 2 officers were handling paperwork at separate desks. A sergeant named Holt Bryaver was moving between stations, reviewing reports and signing off on documentation. Nobody paid particular attention when Carver walked in with Nadia. A shoplifting arrest was not exactly a headline event on a weekend shift. Carver guided her to a chair near the processing desk and began pulling out his notepad. Standard intake procedure. He asked for her name and her identification. It was the first time since the entire encounter began that he had asked her for anything resembling basic information. Nadia told him her name calmly and clearly. Then she told him where her identification was. She explained that her credentials were locked in her glove compartment in the Fresh Mart parking lot because she had been off duty shopping for groceries on her day off. She asked that someone retrieve them or allow her to make a call. Her voice carried no anger, no theatrics. Just the steady, unhurried delivery of a woman who knew exactly how the next few minutes were going to unfold. Carver hesitated. Something in her tone made him pause for the first time since the whole encounter began. He exchanged a look with one of the officers at the nearby desk, then made the call to have someone run her name through the system. The result came back in under 90 seconds. Sergeant Bryaver walked over. He looked at the screen. He looked at Nadia. He looked at Carver. And then the room went very, very quiet. Nadia Calloway, sheriff, 9 years of service, commendation record, 0 disciplinary flags. The officer at the desk slowly pushed back from his chair. Brever set down the folder he was holding. Carver stood completely still, staring at the screen like he was waiting for it to say something different. It did not say something different. The handcuffs came off Nadia Calloway within minutes. Sergeant Brever personally uncuffed her, and the apology that followed from him was immediate and genuine. He ordered someone to retrieve her vehicle from the Fresh Mart lot and have her grocery bag brought in undisturbed. He was visibly shaken, not the theatrical kind of shaken, but the quiet, controlled discomfort of a senior officer who understood exactly what had just happened inside his precinct and what it was going to mean going forward. Carver was pulled to the side of the room. Whatever was said to him in that conversation was not loud. It didn't need to be. The expression on his face as Brever spoke said enough. The confidence that had carried him through Fresh Mart, through the arrest, through the drive and the processing, all of it had drained out completely. He looked exactly like what he was. A young officer who had let assumption replace procedure and was now standing in the wreckage of that decision. Nadia did not leave the precinct immediately. She sat down with Sergeant Brever and laid out every detail of the encounter in precise, sequential order. She described Carver's approach, his refusal to review footage, his dismissal of her receipt, the physical contact, the public arrest, and the drive over. She was not emotional about it. She was thorough. The kind of thorough that comes from 9 years of writing reports and understanding exactly which details carry legal weight. Before she walked out of that precinct, she had already requested the formal complaint paperwork. Internal Affairs was notified before the end of that shift. The footage from Fresh Mart, the same footage Carver had refused to review, was pulled and preserved as evidence. It showed Nadia entering the store, shopping, paying at the register, and receiving her receipt. Every second of it was clean. The case against Dylan Carver was already building itself, and Nadia Calloway had only just gotten started. The legal process moved with a steadiness that Carver had not anticipated. Nadia retained an attorney within 48 hours of the incident. The lawsuit she filed cited unlawful arrest, racial profiling, excessive use of authority, and defamation of character. She was not pursuing the case out of bitterness. She was pursuing it because she understood better than most that accountability without consequence is just paperwork. And she intended for this to have real consequence. The video recorded by the woman near the bread display had already circulated widely by Monday morning. It showed the full confrontation, Carver's approach, his dismissal of the receipt, the moment he reached for Nadia's arm, and the walk to the cruiser. The comments beneath it told their own story. The precinct's public affairs office issued a statement acknowledging the incident was under review. It was carefully worded and said very little. The Fresh Mart footage did the rest of the talking. Griff Lauder and Petey were both interviewed as part of the internal investigation. Neither could produce a single concrete reason for the initial suspicion beyond what Nadia had already known from the moment Petey first appeared at the end of that aisle. The store issued a formal apology. It was accepted without warmth. The civil case was settled 4 months after the incident. $150,000. Damages and defamation. Paid out and documented. Dylan Carver was suspended without pay for 7 months and entered a mandatory retraining program upon his return. One focused specifically on bias, de-escalation, and procedural compliance. Whether that retraining changed anything in him was a question only time would answer. Nadia Calloway went back to work the following Monday. Same badge, same 9 years behind her, same commitment to a job she had never once taken lightly. The only difference was that one rookie officer now understood something he should have known from day one. A uniform is not a license to assume. The law that Dylan Carver swore to uphold was the same law that dismantled everything he did that afternoon. And the woman he underestimated because of a gray hoodie and the color of her skin turned out to be the very person most qualified to hold him to it. $150,000, 7 months suspended, a permanent mark on a record that had barely begun. Was it enough? That's a question worth sitting with. Because the real cost of what happened in that supermarket cannot be measured in dollars or suspension days. It lives in every person who watched a woman get handcuffed for buying groceries. It lives in every officer who chooses assumption over procedure. And it lives in every system that allows 14 months of a badge to feel like 14 years of authority. So here's the question to close on. If Dylan Carver had taken 30 seconds to look at that footage, where would everyone be today? Think about that. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments. What do you think should happen to officers like Carver? Was the punishment enough, or should it have gone further? Drop your thoughts below. We read every single one. And if you haven't already, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe so you never miss another story. We'll see you in the next one.